people, including a woman's right to choose, including the rights of minorities, including really the rights of vulnerable people and people who need the government's protection to live their lives in a safe and fulfilling way. His position on the unitary executive, which basically puts the president in charge of everything, all the administrative agencies and even people who've got terms on their offices and everything else, is supposedly an attack on the bureaucracy, but in fact it is an attack on government efforts to make people's lives better. And I think that it's fair to conclude that is pretty frightening, that would signal a significant change in the way that this government interacts with people. His hostility toward Roe versus Wade is palpable, and I think people who are interested in those issues need to take his candidacy very, very seriously on the merits, whatever else is going on in terms of the confirmation process. And speaking of things that change hour by hour, right. I don't know what's going on because I haven't looked at my phone since I walked in here to start this podcast.
Yeah, and I think I think on Thursday, so Professor Christine Blasey Ford, she accepted the Senate committee's request to testify on her claim, and I think by the time this podcast comes out, she'll have already spoken. But the hearing is tentatively set. I think it's even more than tentatively now set for this Thursday.
I think everything's tentative.
Yeah. So 1 week after the California professor accused the Supreme Court nominee of attempted sexual assault on her when she was in high school, another woman has come forward as well, talking about additional misconduct. My question was, and you talked a little bit about history, do you see this as vastly different between now and the Clarence Thomas hearings when he was being accused of sexual harassment?
This is such a different time compared to that it is absolutely astonishing. And really, even for those of us who can remember those hearings, as I do, find it hard to put ourselves back in that time and compare it to today. The shame that people should have felt in the way that Anita Hill was treated in the Thomas hearings, I hope will lead this process to in a more productive way, in a more respectful way. I don't really know whether it will or not. It's so hard. Yogi Berra is famous for saying predictions are so difficult, especially about the future. And so how this is going to play out, I don't know. I do know that when you've got these kinds of very serious allegations against a candidate, ordinarily you would have the FBI not in its crime-solving role, but in its vetting role to provide the appointing authority, for one thing, the White House, with information that they should have, but also providing the Senate with information they should have about a candidate. You would think that's the way to get at it and not have a swearing contest in a congressional hearing room.
I think one of the main differences that is occurring between the Anita Hill, Clarence Thomas, and the Kavanaugh issue now is that Anita Hill and Clarence Thomas, they were both adults when it happened. They were both working together, and this was something that happened over a sustained amount of time, continuously for almost 8 years. And I think the largest aspect is that there's not a movement similar to the Me Too movement that was apparent back then. And I think that if there was something similar to that now, the results would have been, I think, different.
Yeah, that seems right to me. The other odd thing about this is that you've got some people saying, "Oh, it was a youthful indiscretion. Boys will be boys," et cetera, et cetera.
That's so dangerous. Saying something like that is so dangerous.
Yeah.
It is enormously dangerous, and it is so inconsistently applied. I mean, because these are the same people that want to send juveniles up the river for life or for decades and decades for actions that occurred before their brains were fully formed at all. So it seems to me you can't have it both ways. If one person is entitled to some consideration because of their youth or lack of experience, that the same rule ought to be for everybody. Remember the part about equal justice under law?
Oh, that's a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we learned about that.
Off and on, yeah. I hope so. I hope that got squeezed into one of those courses somewhere along the line.
Equality? Equality.
Yeah, I predict the biggest similarity between the two situations is that they both end up on the Supreme Court, in my own cynical view. But we're coming up on time. Can we ask fun questions now?
I have a couple of fun questions.
Now I need to really be on the lookout.
I'll start with a general one, just because, since we are a law school podcast. I mean, did you hate law school? Did you love law school?
Well, I'll talk about law school. This may seem odd or geeky or something. I actually enjoyed the first year of law school. It's hard for me to explain why, except that it was sort of like watching a very intricate machine work and learning a whole new language, learning what so many of the terms meant that you would read in the newspapers, and it was kind of unlocking a whole world for me that I hadn't known anything about. I hadn't had any lawyers in my family, and I thought it was kind of cool, actually. I was in law school with a friend of mine from college, and I remember it was, I think, in March or April that we kind of finally got the message about how miserable we were supposed to be. And these were kind of the bad old days of law school too, where students were occasionally really getting grilled in class, and you had some people who wanted to use the Socratic method to kind of beat up on folks.
Well, they still do that quite a bit, yeah.
What? Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe it was worse back then. I don't know.
It was pretty bad from time to time.
Now, when you were a professor, did you use the Socratic method?
I was perfectly behaved in all situations.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's ambiguous language. Perfectly behaved could mean anything.
I will say that looking back on it, when I think about the way that some of these professors worked these very large classes, I don't know what your largest classes were, but
Ours was torts.
Yeah, I've had torts for mine is 60.
Yeah, Hannah and I had torts together, and it was almost 100.
Okay, so so that's about the same. I had some classes that were 100, and I don't know if you've got any professors. I won't ask you on the air whether you do or not, who could kind of take that amphitheater type room and literally kind of play it like an organ. In the sense of, like, if I call on you, I know what kind of answer I'm going to get. If I call on you, I know that I'm going to get a different sort of answer. If I call over here, I'm going to get something else. And to remember all that and to use that to make a point was, I'm just going to say, it's an art. It really is when it's done right. And I think it can be done without humiliating people and without beating up on people, too. So... and then much of second and third year, I actually spent doing clinical legal work. Was in a civil clinic second year and a criminal clinic third year, and actually representing people and appearing in court a lot. And so that's kind of what kept me sane during second and third year.
Appearing in court kept you sane?
It did.
Okay.
It did. It would be because it was an opportunity to interact with real people in real situations, and it wasn't just an abstract intellectual exercise. It's like, how are we going to help you get out of this situation? And so, whether that set me on any particular course or not, I don't know. But it was very gratifying to be able to do that.
Thank you for listening to the Cold Call Lawcast. Follow us on social media at Cold Call Lawcast. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Ask us any question you'd like, and we'll answer it on our next episode.
You can also tune in next week for the second half of our discussion with John Gordon, director of Minnesota ACLU.
Yeah, right into John.
Excellent.
So who am I talking to? Am I talking to both you guys?
Talking to all of us.
All of you, all four of you. Oh my!
This is the
Like kind of a roundtable.
Wow.
Yeah.
Assault on all fronts.
podcast format.